Thanks, Les. My presentation is going to feel all the more earnest for all of your jokes. And thank you, Angela. I really enjoyed that. I love that tour along the Campaspe. It's really effective with the map and the photos, and yeah, great river, great project you're doing there. Random fact / maybe a myth about the Campaspe that I heard sometime in the past was that it was named by Major Mitchell after a mistress of Alexander the Great.
Wow.
Saucy.
Yeah, that explains some of the things that happen on there.
But they're only naked photos.
What?
It was painted by the Italian, so there's always naked paintings on places like that.
Oh, there we go. Does sound like a fact, not a myth. Okay, well, thank you. I am from Alluvium Consulting. Some of you may be aware of Alluvium's work, where, for those who are not, we're a niche consultancy that's focused on river health and water resources and catchment management. Traditionally, Alluvium has been focused more on engineering and science, but we also do have expertise in social science as well. So that's what I'm here to talk a little bit about tonight. Pleased to be able to share a little bit of what we do in that field. So, yeah, I'm going to talk about engagement through narrative, through stories, basically, tonight. And about this time last year, I was on a field trip in rural Queensland. It was a lot warmer. It was very lovely. It was in the Fitzroy Basin, and I was enjoying lots of cups of tea and home-baked treats and poring over sepia-coloured photos with some folk in a town called Taroom, which is in the Dawson River catchment. And it's in the Banana Shire, believe it or not. True.
I want to live there.
I don't know if you do, but no. I was there basically to capture some of the social history of the Palm Tree Creek and the Robinson Creek, the Palm Tree Creek and the Robinson Creek wetlands. And I was basically doing that through interviewing about a dozen of some local landholders there whose families had lived and worked for a number of generations by the wetlands. And I was there for the Fitzroy Basin Association, and it was the first of a series of investigations that they were doing into the wetland system. The other investigations included fauna, flora, other sciencey things, hydrology, geomorphology, and actually Indigenous values as well. And the idea was that the Fitzroy Basin Association would use those assessments, those investigations, to help put together a management plan for the area and also some external communications materials. That particular part of the world is predominantly cattle farming, cattle grazing, and it has a fair bit of interest and development in the coal mining area as well. So, I mean, part of this was documenting some of the significance of those wetlands because it really wasn't very well known in the face of some of those different developments, I guess. And this is despite the fact that it is registered in the National Register of Significant Wetlands, but there's very little known about them because partly, or documented by the authorities at least, partly because they're mostly on private land. Predominantly on private land. So there's a few reasons that they sent the social scientists in first, and one of them was just simply the intention to capture some of the social history for, to really understand some of that social significance of the wetlands, the connections that people have because of their livelihoods and beyond that as well. Also, because there wasn't very much known about the wetlands, they thought it was probably a good idea to get some insights and observations from the people who knew them pretty well before they, to help inform some of the other investigations. But the other key reason was that they recognised that it was a good idea if you were trying to, first of all, just even get people onto their land to look at the vegetation and hydrology and so on, but also down the track to get people engaged in the management plan and the implementation of the management plan, that you'd want to have ask them what they think first, ask them about the values, that they see how they've looked after them, how they've seen them change, that sort of thing. So they recognise that importance of doing that to really be able to build some trust and some rapport. And that's certainly been my experience in the past. I've worked for a number of years for Environment Victoria in the Healthy Rivers campaign, and storytelling was something that we used, or story capturing was something we used a lot. It's a bit like your experience. I had Paul Sinclair was my manager, and he had many wonderful ideas, and other people implemented them, and that was one of the ones that Paul threw out there, is this idea of capturing people's stories of connection to their waterways and building, a record of that online, and also using it as that vehicle to build some relationships with people so you could tackle some more difficult stuff. And that's certainly an experience that we'd had if we were wanting to find a community volunteer to be on a stream flow management planning process, or try and build up some support for putting in some submissions to do with particular policy processes. We'd often go in and do a project like this of story capturing, and as a way to sort of just build relations, soften them up. No, that was Anne's words. Yeah, so anyway, these are two of the people that I did interview when I was out on the Palm Tree Creek and Robinson Creek wetlands. They're Adam and Dot Clark, and they have a particular connection to Lake Nunbank, which is part one of the wetlands, or lakes. There's a distinction, Mark knows. And they had absolutely wonderful stories to tell. Adam had... he described it as basically the most glorious childhood you could imagine. He'd be sent out with like a tomahawk and some lunch and just go and explore and build cubbies and steal eggs, and his dad built him a tin canoe, and they were just constantly swimming, and they had all these wonderful stories about waking up to the sound of water birds and the grandmother bribing the grandchildren to collect all the frogs who were displacing her flowers in the vase every night, and so they had lots of wonderful stories, and I probably could have written a book, but I think I wrote it 500 words. But anyway, they're definitely, the way they spoke, it was very clear that lake was a big part of their identity, I guess, their sense of place, and it had a very significant played a very significant role in their life. They were also clearly very good stewards of the water body and of the land as well around it. They shared their Clark family motto, which was live your life as if you are going to die tomorrow, but farm your land as if you're going to die forever. Oh, sorry, die forever. I can't believe this is being recorded. As if you're going to live forever. So anyway, Adam and Dot, I took this photo right before they had to scoot off to go and help with the oldies with the Meals on Wheels. Bless them, they're good folk. So anyway, I think that probably quite a few of you have, in the room, have heard lots of stories like this, captured them for your own work, I suppose, and shared them and used them in other ways. I just basically want to have a chat tonight about, I guess from my experience, some of the reasons why it's really good, really effective to capture and to share stories as a tool in community engagement work. And I think it comes down to these 4 R's. The recognition, reflection, rapport and reach. So in terms of recognition, you've heard it before, everyone has a story to tell. And I think it's true, and really, if prompted, people are pretty happy to share it too. And there's a few sort of elements to this idea of recognition. I think it's firstly about recognising that stories and storytelling is really part of our nature. It's something throughout history, cultural knowledge and values have been passed from generation to generation through stories. It's about recognising that you don't need to be a scientific expert or a policy expert to really understand why rivers and wetlands matter. It's about recognising that sense of place and that sense of belonging and the connection that waterways often have with that. It's about recognising the importance of history and recognising that you do have to capture it too before you lose it often. and recognising that sense of responsibility too, and the personal role we all play as being stewards of the land, of the lands and the wetlands and the waterways that we love. So a few years back, when I was still with Environment Victoria, I ran a project called Hattah Lake Storylines, and that was a digital storytelling project. So basically it was a workshop with a dozen people together who all had some form of connection to Hattah Lakes on the Murray, and they brought along their old photos and memories and videos and things like that, and they, in a workshop with a filmmaker and social historian, sort of got some guidance in terms of how you tell stories and digitally as well, put to them those digital storytelling skills. And they made these little 2 to 3 minute films about their personal experience and connection to Hattah Lakes. It was narrated, they narrate them in their own voice too. So they were, it was a really great project, but part of it was not just that we had these great products at the end, but the process that people went through as well. The fact that we did evaluation at the end of the workshops, and people really, it was a strong theme that people felt that it was very empowering. The fact that they got to reflect on why they love this place, and they sort of had a renewed enthusiasm and determination to kind of protect it. They all had to develop promotion plans too, so, you know, talking on the radio about their films, or, you know, showing their films at events and things like that. So there was a lot of feedback that people enjoyed the process of really recognising that they had a role as stewards of that place. Reflection. When you ask people if they have a story of connection to their waterway, like most of the time people are, oh no, I don't have anything to say, and you give them like a day, a couple of days, and all of a sudden they realise they actually do have a lot to say. And that's one of the great things I think about that process of storytelling, is it provides that space and that time for people to reflect and to think about it and think, why is it important to me? And we'll often have, in the past I've had sort of, once we've collected some stories about a particular waterway, have a celebration, and people hear about other people's stories too. And so it's not just reflection personally, it's sort of that collective reflection too, of learning from each other and why people value it differently, but also, you know, the common values as well. It's also very important in terms of reflection. It can be an important tool in terms of therapy as well. There's some examples, especially when people have been through extreme events, that going through the process of sharing their stories can be very healing. When I was on a urban water study tour overseas in 2009, went to a place in the Netherlands called Roomboek, and they had in 2000 had a fireworks explosion. They had a fireworks factory in this town, and it exploded, and it was a terrible disaster. It wiped out a lot of the town and killed a lot of people, and a lot of people were injured. And so as part of the rebuilding process, they built this, it's called the House of Stories, and it's basically a physical space where they keep a lot of stories and photos and prose and photographs and lots of stuff from that event as well. And it was really considered a very important tool for helping people to heal as well. Rapport. Those who are familiar with the IAP2, the International Association of Public Participation framework, will probably know that the number one foundation of their approach is that effective public participation. It recognises that people bring different values, and people, you know, perceive particular decisions or whether to be part of processes really because of their values. And that's, I think, one of the great things about storytelling is that it takes it away from a lot of the issues and divisiveness and all that sort of stuff, and brings it back to values. And it's often very clear that there are common values, a lot more common than you would expect sometimes with different stakeholders. And I just was thinking about it, and in my experience, these are really some of the common themes that will come up time and time again with the stories. And as you can see, they're all pretty kind of basic human values and human, like, concepts that we can all understand and relate to. I never forget when I was doing some work on the Jellybrand River, and there was a dairy farmer right near the estuary, and he was a little bit reluctant to get involved, but then he started telling me all about basically why he wanted to see environmental flows in the Jellybrand. But he premised it by saying, I'm not a greenie, but, and you'd see that all the time, people don't like the labels, or but when you actually start telling stories, people realise it's the same sort of stuff, we have the same values. The last R is reach. So really, sharing stories can be very inspiring, both for the people who are telling the story and the people who are listening. We found that those Storylines project, the digital storytelling one on Hatter, really captured people's imagination, and we got a lot of media coverage. We got a double-page spread in the Herald Sun, which is gold, really, when you work in... Well, it was the education supplement, but still. It was the Herald Sun. And we had a packed-out cinema. Was it Acme we launched it, and we had to have more screenings because lots of people wanted to come. So it was really captured people's imagination. I think it was a really useful tool to then start talking about environmental watering, which can sometimes be otherwise hard to get people to engage with. Other things I've come across recently, been doing a little bit of work around flood social research, and it's pretty well established that you have trouble, like if you can educate people and they'll know that they should be more prepared, but the behaviour change just doesn't sort of happen. So there's a lot of research at the moment about how you can actually get people to change their behaviour in line with their awareness. And in the UK Economic and Social Research Council has been funding some research around the idea of flood memories and the effectiveness of flood memories in terms of building knowledge and resilience with communities, and they've just partnered up with the UK Environment Agency and now trialling the use of some digital storytelling to really test some of those ideas as well. So that's the 4 R's: recognition, reflection, rapport and reach. So I'd really recommend that if you get the chance, if you don't already, to include some storytelling, some story capturing and sharing in your community engagement toolbox. It's a really useful one to do. Do I have time to show a digital story, or
Yes.
out of time? Yeah?
Does she have time to show it?
Yes.
Yeah? Okay. Just in case you've just been like, what is that digital story thing she's talking about? So I've got a couple.
I was born the son of an apiarist. My father was an apiarist and he had a wealth of knowledge, so I was virtually born with my head in a beehive. So I learned from a very early age. And after big flood times, well, the bush would just come to life. The trees would start to grow. Using binoculars, you could see the tiny buds starting to appear on the trees, and you knew that within 12 months' time that the trees would flower and you'd be in for a good honey flow. But late November, we'd see the first buds start to burst open and turn to blossom, and by mid-December, a large portion of the trees were in flower. And if the honey hadn't started to flow by then, Dad always said, just wait for the full moon and it'll yield then. And he was very seldom wrong. It was like turning a honey tap on. The honey just flowed. There was nothing one day, and the next day the honey's pouring in and the bees were gathering it, and within 10 or 12 days they were full, and we were just flat out trying to keep them empty. And if we were lucky, the black box trees would continue to flower after that, and that'd last for about another month. And all the trees really needed was water. On weekends we'd go out with 3 or 4 boats. We'd motor through the floodwaters and stop and take photos of the birds in the nest, the young birds and the eggs. And we'd stop on an island in the middle of the floodwaters and have a barbecue. And we'd crank up the wok on a bed of coals and cook beer battered Murray cod, and they were really good times. I've caught many Murray cod and yellowbelly over the years, and I've shot my fair share of wild ducks. I just loved the place with a passion. I couldn't think of any better place I'd like to live. I was born there and I intend to die there. I had a chance to play league football, which was quickly passed up when I realised that my love of the forest and the bees and the trees, the fishing and the shooting, I couldn't pass up. So I was sort of homesick before I left. I've always said that when you can't see the Kahuna water tower, you've travelled too far. All you need is water. Unfortunately, the long drought has put an end to these great times, and hopefully in the future nature will repeat itself and these great times will return again. Environmental water flows are a small help. Every little bit helps, of course, but what we really need is a big flood event. And if this happens, will everybody be happy, even the forest.
So that marks it in history, isn't it? That was 2007 maybe, I think. So.
National Park, where we like to play murder in the dark. We like to hop and jump and play, so listen to what we've got to say. There's lots of plants and lots of trees. Hatter is really special to me.
When I was little, we went for a walk around Lake Hatter. We started looking for all the different kinds of bark. Suddenly, letters appeared on the ground. When we had finished our walk, we had found every letter of the alphabet. I wondered if I learnt my letters that day. Happy birthday to you. For my 11th birthday, I was allowed to choose where I wanted to go. Straight away, I said Hatter because I love it and so do my sisters. We had a treasure hunt, lollies on a string, and 3-legged races. We didn't have a damper cake though. We had one for my 7th birthday and I didn't like it. It was yuck. One time we were camping in the coal column and we saw a kookaburra floating on the water. We swam in and rescued it. We put it on a tree branch, then 5 minutes later it was back in the water. We rescued it again, then put it on the tree branch. The next day it was gone. One time we were watching 13 apostle birds sitting on a fence. They were all chattering and one bird in the middle of the group was squawking and squawking. Then one of the end birds shifted up next to the upset bird. Immediately the line was perfectly quiet.
It was my first time at Millpool. I was so young I couldn't even walk. When I saw my sister Isabel climbing trees, I crawled over to her. Mum lifted me up on the log and helped me to climb it. Trust me, it's really hard to climb trees before you can walk.
Just shows how amazing the wildlife and plants are. We have to keep it this way. But at the end of the day, I love Hatter.
It's where the birds and emus go, and where the Murray pines and red gums grow. You can go on a long or short hike, or just ride around on your bike. There's lots of plants and lots of trees. Hatter is really special to me.
So Madeline was a 12-year-old when she was part of that workshop, and the eldest person we had was Murray Bouchier, who was 74. So it was quite a diverse group. And that's it.
A couple of questions for Leonie live at this stage. Remember, we can pepper her later.
Yes. How do you do community engagement with Indigenous communities? So we saw that you're doing videos. So how does the community? How does the approach with Indigenous communities? How do you do it?
Yeah, that's a good question. In every time I've gone to a new wetland or a new river and gone to do a storytelling project, always want to make sure we're engaging with an Indigenous person. It's actually been very difficult. Often I've found that because the style of storytelling I do is often personal, it's about people's personal connections, that often Indigenous people won't want to talk from a personal perspective or don't feel it's culturally appropriate to do that, and then don't feel like it's appropriate to talk on behalf of a whole bunch of people as well. So it's always been very difficult. The other challenge you'll sometimes get is because, in my experience, in the areas I've been involved in, at least, a lot of Indigenous people get asked to do a lot of things, a lot of engagement, and so there's they'll often request payment for to participate in the storytelling projects, which is often a difficult one because we're not paying anyone else, and so it's often caused a bit of dilemmas there. So for the Hatter Lake storylines, we had an Indigenous participant, and she struggled with some of that stuff as well. But in the end, I thought she did a good story, but it is a real challenge. I actually asked. I met Cheryl Buchanan. Do you know Cheryl Buchanan? She's from Queensland.
Southwest
Queensland. Yeah. So she's like the chair of.
Hoover?
Anyway, she's quite a leading figure in the Murray-Darling Basin kind of discussions about in cultural flows and things like that. And I met her recently and asked her advice about, strategies for engaging Indigenous people with storytelling. And she quite bluntly said, well, the first time you speak to them, they're going to have a lot to get off their chest. Just be prepared for that. So maybe I have to do a few sessions. Yeah.
All right, we'll leave it there until